Welcome to Fortune Forecast. I am Daisy, your hostess, and you are in my book playlist. We are now in part 3, the book titled The Book of Love, from the series titled The Book of Life, written by Upton Sinclair, published in 1921 by the Payne Book Company in Chicago. It is in the public domain. If you're new to my channel, glad you found me. And if you're ready to jump into the next chapter, please go to the description where in the timestamp it will take you right there. Otherwise, you can stick around here while I share my narrator's comments regarding chapters 32 and 33, which talked about sex and nature and sex and the poor. Okay, I don't know where to start on this, but I want to share with you that as I read through these chapters, it brought back memories that I have had suppressed for quite some time. As some of you that have been following me know that I am a former deputy sheriff from Miami-Dade County in Florida. Now it seems like a long time ago. There were many issues where the author talked about sex and the poor. And because I patrolled in an inner city community, I could tell you that I did see prostitution. I did see male prostitution. I saw female prostitution. But one of the worst things that I had seen, when he mentioned that part about incest, there was an incident where an uncle literally raped a baby that was younger than 8 months old. So as you can see, when the author was writing it, for me, I have seen these things. I cannot begin to describe that. And it seems to go back to the moral conduct, the moral fortitude. And as we as a race move forward into the future, what is the answer? It just really seems to me, my dear one, that it's going to be an effort by each and every one of us. Then who's to say, are we creating a new standard? And why? Why is it that the moral values and ideals of the past seem to be, eroding right in front of our very eyes? And why is it seem that there are rules yet that apply to one group of society but not to the other? So why have rules, right? Have we reached a place in humanity where it appears that we are a microwave society? We want things now. We do not want to put forth the effort and go through the journey of what we may become. Yet it seems that there's many factors regarding all of this, that we are giving in to instant pleasures than focusing on the long-term commitments. I would like to hear your comments. What do you think that we can do as a society to address the current level of morality? Let's see if the author has an answer for us as he go into chapter 34, titled Love and Economics. Maintains that our sex disorders are of social origin due to the displacing of love by money as a motive in mating. If the cause of our sex disorders is not physiological, what is it? Everything in nature must have a cause, and this includes human nature, the actions and feelings of men, both as individuals and as groups. We hear the saying, you can't change human nature. But the fact is that human nature is one of the most changeable things in the world. We can watch it changing from age to age, for better or for worse. And if we had the intelligence to use the forces now at our command, we could mold human nature as precisely as a brewer converts a carload of hops into a certain brand of beer. Voltaire was author of the saying, vice and virtue are products like vinegar. Our civilization is based upon industrial exploitation and class privilege, the monopoly of the means of production and the natural resources of wealth by a group. This enables the privileged group to live in idleness upon the labor of the rest of society. It confers unlimited power with practically no responsibility, a strain which not one human being in 1,000 has the moral strength to endure. History for the past 5,000 years is one demonstration after another that the conferring upon a class of power without responsibility means the collapse of that class and the downfall of its civilization. So far as concerns the ruling class male, what the system of privilege does is to give him unlimited ability to indulge his sex desires. What it does for the female is to submit her to the male desires and to abolish that mutuality in sex, that interaction between male and female influence, which is the very essence of its purpose. Woman, in a predatory society, is subject to a double enslavement, that of class as well as of sex, and the result is the perverting of sexual selection and a constantly increasing tendency towards the survival of the unfit. In a state of nature that males compete among themselves for the favor of the female is not raped, nor is she kidnapped. On the contrary, she exercises her prerogative. She inspects the various male charms which are set before her, and selects those which please her, according to her deeply planted instincts. The result is that the weak and the unfit males seldom have a chance to reproduce themselves, and the procreating is done by the highest specimens of the type. But now we have a world which is ruled by money, in which opportunity and indeed survival depend upon money, and the whole tendency of society is to make money standards supreme. We do not like to admit this, of course. Our instincts revolt against it, and our higher faculties reinforce the revolt. So we carefully veil our money motives and invent polite phrases to conceal them. You will hear people deny it is money which determines admission into what is called society, the intimate life of the ruling class. They will tell you that it is not money. It is good taste, refinement, charm of personality, and so on. But if you analyze all these things, you speedily discover that they are made out of money. They are symbols of the possession of money, devised by those who possess it, as a means of keeping themselves apart from those who do not possess it. I would safely defy a member of the ruling class to name a single element in what he calls refinement or good taste that is not in its ultimate analysis a symbol of the possession of money. Let it be the pronunciation of a word, or the cut of a coat, or the method of handling a fork, whatever it may be. It is part of a code, revealing that the person, or more important yet, the ancestors of the person, have belonged to the leisure class, and have had time and opportunity to learn to do things in a certain precise, conventional way. I say conventional, for very frequently these tests have no relationship whatever to reality. Considered as a matter of common sense and convenience, it is a great deal better to eat peas with a spoon than with a fork, and to use both a knife and a fork in eating lettuce. But if you eat peas with a spoon or use a knife on lettuce, every member of the ruling class will instantly know that you are an interloper, as much so as if you took to throwing the china at your hostess. Our culture is a money culture. Our standards are money standards, and our sex decisions are based upon money, not upon love. Any man can have money in our society, provided the accident of birth favors him, and it is everywhere known that any man who has money can get a wife. It is certainly not true that any man with no money can get a wife, and it is true that most men who have little money have to take wives who have less, that is, who belong to a lower class, according to the world standards. The average young girl of the propertied class is trained for marriage as for any other business. She is taught to be sexually cold, but to imitate sexual excitement deliberately so as to arouse it in the male and to keep herself surrounded with a swarm of males. This being the basis of her prestige, the factor which will cause the eligible man, the catch, to desire her. In polite society, this proceeding is known as a coquetry or charm, and it would be no exaggeration to say that 75% of all the novels so far written in the world are expositions of this activity. Also, that when we go to the theater, we go in order to watch and sympathize with these manifestations of pecuniary sexuality. As a rule, the young girl knows what she is doing, but she is taught to camouflage it, to preserve her innocence. She would not dream of marrying for money. She wants to marry something distinguished, that is to say, something which has received the stamp of approval from a world which approves money. She wants to marry somebody who is elegant, who is in good form. She wants to marry without having to think about the horrid subject of money at all, and so she is carefully chaperoned and confined to a world where nothing but money is to be met. In Tennyson's poem, The Northern Farmer, the old fellow is coaching his son on the subject of marriage, and they are driving along a road, and the farmer listens to his horse's hoofs, and they're saying, "Property, property, property." The farmer sums up in one sentence the doctrine of pecuniary marriage as it is taught to the ruling class virgin. Don't thee marry for money, but go where money is. In this process, of course, the ruling class virgin must spend a great deal of money in order to keep up her own prestige. And when she is married, she must spend it to keep up the prestige of her unmarried sisters, and then of her children. As a result of this, the only ruling class males who can afford to marry are the rich ones. There are always some who are richer, and these are the most desirable. So the tendency with each generation is to put the period of marriage further off. The man has to wait until he has accumulated enough property to satisfy the girl of his desires, a girl whom he admires because of her pecuniary prestige. He delays, and meantime he satisfies his passions with the daughters of the poor. As a result of this, when he does finally come to marry, he is apt to be unlovely and unlovable. The woman frequently does not love him at all, but takes him cold-bloodedly because he is eligible. In that case, she is a cold and sexless wife. Or else, after she has married him, she discovers his unloveliness and either decides that all men are selfish brutes and reconciles herself to a celibate life, or else she goes out and preys upon the domestic happiness of other women. End of chapter 34. We will continue right here in this video to chapter 35. If you haven't done so, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's move on. Marriage and money. Discusses the causes of prostitution and that higher form of prostitution known as the marriage of convenience. I realize that all these sex problems are complicated. Every case is individual, and in no two cases can you give exactly the same explanation. But it is my thesis that, whatever the cause, if you trace down the causes of the cause, you will find economic inequality and class privilege. It is evident in the lives of the rich, and it is even more evident in the lives of the poor, who are not permitted the luxury of pretense. The poor live in a world dominated by forces which they seldom understand, subjected to enormous pressure which crushes and destroys them without their being able to see it or touch it. In the world of the poor, there is first of all poverty. There is insecurity of employment and insufficiency of wage, and the daily and hourly terror of starvation and ruin. Above this is a world of power and luxury, a wonderland of marvels and thrills, seen through a colored mist of romance. The working class girl, born to drudgery and perpetual childbearing, has a brief hour in which her cheeks are red and her beauty is ripe, and out of the heaven above her steps a male creature panoplied in the armor of ruling class prestige, that is to say, a dress suit, and scattering about him a shower of automobile rides, jewelry, and candy and flowers. She opens her arms to him, and then, when her brief hour of rapture is past, she becomes the domestic drudge of some working man, or else the inmate of a brothel. It is a custom of social workers and church people seeking data about these painful subjects to interview numbers of prostitutes and question them as to the causes of their fall. So you read statistics to the effect that 17% of the prostitution has an economic cause, that 26% is caused by love of finery, etc. These pious people, employed by the ruling class to maintain ruling class prestige by demonstrating that wage slavery has nothing to do with white slavery, attain their purpose by restricting the word economic to food and shelter, forgetting that young girls do not live by bread alone, but also by ribbons and silk stockings and moving picture shows and trips to Coney Island and everything else that gives a monetary escape from drudgery into joy. We all understand, of course, that the daughters of the rich are entitled to joy, and we provide them with it as a matter of course. But the daughters of the poor are supposed to work in a cotton mill 10 or 11 hours a day from earliest childhood, and the joy we provide for them is vicarious. As a woman poet sets it forth, quote, "The golf links lie so near the mill that almost every day the laboring children can look out and see the men at play." End quote. Some years ago, my wife and I were invited to meet Mrs. Mary J. Good, a keeper of brothels in the Tenderloin, who had revolted against the system of police graft and had exposed it in the newspapers. My wife questioned her closely as to the psychology of people in her business, and she insisted that the majority of prostitutes were not oversexed, nor were they feeble-minded. They were women who had loved and trusted, and had been thrown down. As Mrs. Good phrased it, they said to themselves, "Never again. After this, they'll pay." As a matter of fact, the causes of prostitution are so largely economic that the other factors are hardly worth mentioning. The sale of sex is known in savage society and would be unknown in a socialist society. If here and there some degenerate individual would rather sell her sex than do her share of honest labor in a free and just world, such an individual would become a patient in the psychopathic ward of a public hospital. Economic forces drive women to prostitution, first, by direct starvation, and second, by teaching them money standards of prestige, the ideal of living without working, which is the heaven achieved by the rich and longed for by the poor. Contributory to the process are policemen, politicians, and judges who protect the property of the rich and prey upon the disinherited. Also, newspaper editors, college professors, priests of God, and preachers of Jesus, who attribute the social evil to original sin or the weakness of human nature. So far as men are concerned, economic forces operate by three main channels: late marriage, loveless marriage, and drudgery in wives. You will find patronizing and maintaining the brothels the following kinds of males. First, young boys who have been taught that it is manly to gratify their sex impulses. Second, young men who take it for granted that they cannot afford to marry. Third, old bachelors who have looked at marriage and decided that it is not a paying proposition. Fourth, married men who have been picked out for their money and have come to the conclusion that good women are necessarily sexless, and finally marry men whose wives have lost the power to charm them by continuous childbearing and the physical and nervous strain of domestic slavery. This latter applies not merely to the wives of the poor. It applies to members of the middle classes and even of the richer classes, because the job of managing many servants is often as trying as the doing of one's own work. To explain how domestic drudgery is caused by economic pressure would require a little essay in itself. The home is the place where the man keeps his sex property apart under lock and key, and it is therefore the portion of our civilization least influenced by modern ideas. Women still drudge in separate kitchens and nurseries as they have drudged for thousands of years. They cook their dinners over separate fires and have each their own little group of children, generally ill cared for, because the work is done by an untrained amateur. Moreover, the prestige of this home has to be kept up because the social position and future prosperity of the man depend upon it. The children must be dressed in frilled and starched clothing, which makes them miserable and wears out the tempers and pocketbooks of the mothers. Costly entertainments must be given, and twice a day a meal must be prepared for the father of the family. All good wives have learned the ancient formula for the retention of masculine affections. Feed the brute. Living in a world of pecuniary prestige, every particle of the woman's surplus energy must go into some form of ostentation, into buying or making things which are futile and meaningless. In such a blind world, dazed by such a struggle, women become irritable. They lose their sex charm. They forget all about love. So the husband gives up hoping for the impossible, accepts the common idea that love and marriage are incompatible, and adopts the formula that what his wife doesn't know will not hurt her. And step by step, as economic evolution progresses, as vested wealth becomes more firmly established and claims for itself a larger and larger share of the total product of society, so step by step you find the pecuniary ideals becoming more firmly established. You find marriage becoming more and more a matter of property and less a matter of love. In European countries, there may still be some love marriages among the poor, but in the upper classes there is no longer any pretense of such a thing, and if you spoke of it, you would be considered absurd. In countries of fresh and naive commercialism like America, the women select the men because of their money prestige, but in Germany, the process has gone a step further. The men are so firmly established in their class positions that they insist upon being bought with a fortune. The same is true when titled foreigners condescend to visit our land of the dollar. They will stoop to a vulgar American wife only in case her parents will make a direct settlement of a fortune upon the husband, and then they take her back home and find their escape from boredom in the highly cultivated mistresses of their own land. Everywhere on the continent, and in Great Britain also, it is accepted that marriages are matters of business, and only incidentally and very slightly of affection. The initiative is commonly taken, but not by young people, but by the heads of the families. Preliminary protocols are exchanged, and then the family solicitors sit down and bargain over the matter. If they were making a deal for a carload of hams, they would be governed by the market price of hams at the moment, also by the reputation of that particular brand of ham, and similarly, in the case of marriage, they are governed by the prestige of the family names and the market price of the husband's prevailing. Always the man exacts a cash settlement, and in Catholic countries, he becomes the outright owner of all the property of his wife, thus reducing her completely to the status of chattel. If any young couple dares to break through these laws of their class, the whole class unites to trample them down. One of the greatest of English novelists George Meredith wrote his greatest novel, The Ordeal of Richard Feverel, to show how, under the most favorable circumstances, the union of a ruling class youth with a farmer's daughter could result in nothing but shipwreck. The country in which the property marriage is most firmly established is probably France. And in France, the rights of nature are recognized in a kind of supplementary union, which constitutes what is known as the domestic triangle, or in the French language, le vie-trois. The young girl of the French ruling classes is guarded every moment of her life like a prisoner in jail. She is sold in marriage and is expected to bear her husband an heir, possibly 2 or 3 children. After that, she is considered not under the law or by the church, but by the general common sense of the community, to be free to seek satisfaction of her love needs. Her husband has mistresses, and she has a lover, and to that lover she is faithful, and in her dealings with him she is guided by an elaborate and subtle code. Practically all French fiction and drama deal with this life in threes, and the complication and tragedies which result from it. I name one novel simply because it happens to be the last that I myself have read, The Red Lily by Anatole France. Of course, every human being knows in his heart that this is a monstrous arrangement, and there are periods of revolt when real feelings surges up in the hearts of men, and we have stories of true love, young and unselfish love, such, for example, as Goethe's Herman and Dorothea, or St. Peter's Paul and Virginia, or Halevy's L'Abbé Constantine. Everybody reads these stories and weeps over them, but everybody knows that they are like the romantic shepherds and shepherdesses of the ancient regime. They never had any existence in reality and are not meant to be taken seriously. If anybody attempts to carry them into action or to preach them seriously to the young, then we know that we are dealing with a disturber of the foundations of the social order, a dangerous and incendiary villain, and we give him a name which sends a shudder down the spine of every friend of the law and order. We call him a free lover. I see before my eyes the wretch cowering upon the witness stand, and the virtuous district attorney, who has perhaps spent the previous night in a brothel, pointing a finger of accusing wrath into his face and thundering, "Do you believe in free love?" The wretch, if he is wise, will not hesitate or parley. He will not ask what the district attorney means by love, or what he means by freedom. Here, in very truth, is a case where he who hesitates is lost. Let the wretch instantly answer, no, he does not believe in free love. He believes in love that pays cash as it goes. He believes in love that investigates carefully the prevailing market conditions, decides upon a reasonable price, has the contract in writing, and lives up to the bargain till death do us part. If the witness be a woman, let the answer be that she believes in slave love, that she expects to be sold for the benefit of her parents, the prestige of her family, and the social position of her future offspring. Let her say that she will be a loyal and devoted servant and will never do anything at any time to invalidate the contract which is signed for her by her parents or guardians. End of chapter 35. All right, let's head over to chapter 36 in the next video, where the author will discuss love versus lust.